Hi, this is Quinn Costello with SF Indie Fest, and I am here with the filmmakers of All Is Vanity. We have the director Marcos Morales, and we have one of uh, the lead actors, Sid Phoenix. Although it's a bit of an ensemble film where, and I feel like it's almost like two ensembles coming together. Um, and I was wondering about. Marcos, can you kind of tell me a little bit about the kind of casting process and working with your actors to play like multiple versions of themselves?
Yes, absolutely. The casting process was actually the first person that came on board was Sid,
Hmm.
because I saw him on a film like in back in 2018, and I knew that he had to play the character because I noticed that he had this, this I felt like he could, show the multiple layers and opposite characters like within the same person, and so he was the first one to came on board, and the other ones I saw them like I started like casting like soon after Sid became on board, and then yeah, the process was like finding the highest contrast possible between the personalities of the characters so the actors were aware that they were, like they had to be one person, like a nice person and a bad person, depending on the character that they were playing. And that was a really interesting process because when you're shooting, I mean, we didn't shoot like in a linear way, so they had to switch from being, this person to this other person, and like from like and back to the the other person like within an hour or so. So that was a really fun process actually to work on that.
And Sid, can you kind of speak to that and like what kind of challenge that poses to you as an actor and what you found interesting about that particular kind of challenge?
Yeah, so it was like it was challenging. There's no point in pretending that it wasn't.
Mhm.
Like when you're playing two completely different people in a single project, and as Marco says, you're not shooting chronologically. Keeping track of that
Mhm.
is is complex. I think part of what I did when I was building the character with Marcos before we started shooting was I really wanted to experiment with maximizing the contrast between the two. And part of that was just I thought it was interesting. I had a very clear image of what I wanted the photographer to be, and Marcos was kind enough to let me experiment with that and go in a direction that, like I had a very clear idea of. And fortunately, that's radically different to me as a person. And
Mhm.
so I think that helped a lot. I think that because of that, it meant, am I going full character or am I essentially just doing something a lot smaller and a lot more naturalistic? And I think making that decision early on in the process made it easier to distinguish scene by scene when we were shooting, because then it was just, keeping track of what's going on. Whereas I think if I'd done something where the characters were a lot more similar,
Mhm.
uh, then it could have been even more challenging.
And to what extent, like Sid, I'm curious, and you maybe speaking for the kind of the ensemble, to what extent were you all kind of aware of how the film was going to kind of take shape? Was there kind of a sense of mystery of like where this is kind of headed and how the story kind of comes together?
So I'll speak for myself first. I don't want to put words in other people's mouths, but as Marcos mentioned, he approached me directly with the script,
Hmm.
and I love indie cinema. Like a lot of my screen career comes from indie cinema, so I'll always read a script. You know what I mean? And
Hmm.
so read it, and from the beginning, I knew that it was going to be a film that maybe 20% of audiences would really connect with and really understand. And
Hmm.
80% of audiences were going to go, I don't really understand what I just watched. It
Hmm.
just so happened that I fall into that 20%. I like the really weird stuff. I love Synecdoche, New York. I love,
Hmm.
stuff that goes into strange and unexpected places, things that are like bordering on the experimental. And so because of that, I went, okay, well, let me sit down with Marcos, have coffee, see if that's
really the vibe. It absolutely was. We spent an hour and a half just talking about our favorite movies. So it's like, okay, cool,
Mhm.
we can work together. And so because of that, I felt going into production that I had a very clear understanding of what Marcos was aiming for. Obviously, as an actor, it's a leap of faith. You never know what's going to wind up ultimately coming out. But I felt like I had an image of that. I don't necessarily think that was the case for everyone else in the cast because, people have different tastes. They have different familiarities with projects. And like I said, if it's 20% of an audience, you can apply that to 20% of a cast. And I reckon I was the 20% who really engaged with
Mhm.
it. And the other 80% were at varying levels of understanding what the overarching image was, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I was curious of like Marcos, like is in terms of how this film is rooted, are there how much of this is kind of based in actual interactions that you've had with people? Is it rooted in the fashion industry in some way? Like how did you kind of come to be kind of familiar with this
No,
world?
actually, but the main I will say that inspiration was the filmmaking process. I mean,
Hmm.
the actual process of making a film from writing it to shoot to the film and edit and all that. But also the inspiration for the characters was from actual people, but they weren't involved in fashion. But they were very archetypical and like I mean you
Hmm.
I wanted really strong characters for especially for the fashion part of the thing. I wanted so you have the shy intern, and they completely, I don't know. You pick the word for the
Hmm.
photographer, but then it's not going to be a good
I, I
description
I
Where in
think
this
of
interview?
I was thinking for the photographer of like an aloof fascist kind of was what I was.
That's one of the many
Yeah,
many ways
yeah,
to
yeah.
describe. So and and I wanted to develop those characters based on people that I came across. So you have an idea about the
Hmm.
photographer, So yeah, and that's where the main inspiration came, and also the process of actually making a film. But I needed to set it in a creative environment, so I chose
Hmm.
fashion and film, and I think it worked because it applies for many industries. I mean, you have these characters. I mean, the photographers. It's not only the
Hmm.
photographer; it can be anybody in any industry. So I'm sure we all met that guy. So yeah.
And can you speak a little bit more to that idea of like exploring the creative process and some of the challenges that kind of come up when you're trying to create work and what some of those themes were that you wanted to kind of explore?
Sure. So the original process was to create the film that took place in a single location where everything was possible. So the only limitation will be the place, but outside of that, I mean, the film, I mean, could continue after it ends. There could
Hmm.
be more layers that we have not discovered. So I wanted to create something that could constantly evolve and makes you wonder kind of what's next. I mean, if we've seen this and then we flip the narrative, and then we keep flipping that narrative, and then I know I just wanted to really push that part and experiment with the structure and with the characters and with everything that I could possibly experiment.
Yeah, and it seems like the film there's a lot of room in the pacing of the film, and some of the funnier aspects are kind of rooted in, kind of giving people a lot of like space for long pauses and just very subtle kind of exchanges and stuff. And I was wondering, maybe Sid, if you could kind of talk about some of the dynamics between yourself and Marcus and like how that was kind of working in terms of allowing you to be able to, does that kind of free you up a bit as an actor if things aren't kind of held so tightly?
Yeah, absolutely. I think any any filmmaking process when the director's working with the actor, I think it's about finding a balance between giving us the freedom to deliver our performance, but not, losing sight of the overarching story that needs to be told. And I loved working with Marcos because the I'd say the vast majority of the dialogue that you see in the film is scripted dialogue, but there was a lot of improvisation kind of around those scripted
Hmm.
moments to allow that energy to fill the space. And I think that meant that when you got into those scripted moments, because we'd been rolling for maybe 2 minutes before the scene and kept rolling for a couple minutes afterwards, it allows things to really have that
Mm.
natural, close to the bone kind of comedy, the sort of stuff where you're almost not sure if you're allowed to laugh because of how
Hmm.
awkward it is. Like, and I adored that. I adored being able to play with that.
Hmm.
And thankfully the cast all became very tight and bounced off of each other a lot. So a lot of times when you're seeing those long, awkward pauses, you're seeing it cut in right before someone corpses, or
Hmm.
like after we've managed to come back to it. And that's where that pregnant energy comes from. Yeah, it was great. It was a joy.
What's been your experience like watching this film in the theaters and seeing people, hearing people kind of respond to certain things? Are there scenes that surprise you in the way that it's received, or
Is Marcos or myself?
you?
Uh, yeah, like I think one of the things I've noticed is that it's always interesting where the first laugh hits,
Hmm.
right? Because there's a bit at the beginning where a lot of times audiences aren't necessarily sure because it's so down the line, like it's such a dry piece of comedy that
Yeah.
audiences just aren't sure that, as I mentioned before, that they're allowed to laugh. And so it takes someone laughing first, and then once
Hmm.
someone is laughed first,
Right.
then you feel the energy in the screening kind of relax, and you can feel people start to go, oh no, okay, we're allowed to laugh at this. And yeah, I've been at screenings where that laugh comes really quite early on because
Hmm.
we'll have someone who has been in a photography shoot and worked with a photographer like that who just instantly is like, oh God, and then you'll have others where it's like maybe 15 minutes into the film where you
Hmm.
get like the first quiver. I think, yeah, it's interesting what different rooms respond to. I
Hmm.
think people are more people laugh earlier when they've worked in fashion or in filmmaking, and I
Hmm.
think people who haven't worked in the creative industries, it takes them a little bit longer, if that
Yeah.
makes sense.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I think that there's something universal about that kind of like gatekeeper person
Yes.
in any industry, you know what I mean? That's using it as their like, I've come to this place on the in the hierarchy, and I'm going to make sure to reassert my position in that hierarchy as
Like that
Yeah.
was the performance. I just
yeah.
wanted people to see it, and as soon as he walks in, just be like, oh God, I know that guy.
Yeah, it's so exhausting.
Yeah.
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 It's great. And Marcos, I guess kind of zooming back out a little bit, can you kind of just talk about how you were able to marshal the resources to pull this off, and maybe even talk a little bit about securing the kind of location and what your production schedule was like.
Mhm. So we shot 9 days over 2 weeks, intense days, and like way back in October 2019. And
Mm.
so the location was the first thing that, I mean, I found the location even when I was writing actually, because I knew that that location, I mean, that I had to shoot the film in that location. I saw other like, fashion studios and things like that, but they weren't the right thing.
Mm.
And so I had to make sure that I secured the location, and then well, the budget was, I had to negotiate the location because otherwise, I mean, we had a very low budget, and that was the biggest expense. So basically, yeah, in order to produce a film, I have to do lots of things, lots of tasks, and it was very. I mean, it took a while. Like it was like 6 months of pre-production, but I was doing everything basically. I was just hiring the people and doing the bookkeeping and securing the location and
Hmm.
line producing, all of the things that were needed. But I I had enough time to do all those things, and luckily everything, just worked out, and I didn't go over budget, and I didn't go. We didn't have to shoot an extra day, so but I mean, luckily, I had people that were able to, luckily I worked with people that were able to deliver what I wanted on time. So the cinematographer was so fast. The actors were like, no major changes were needed when directing them. The first AD kept me like on track at all times, and things like that. I made sure to work with the right people, and when you work with the right people, you get the right results, and I'm very happy for that.
Absolutely. Well, as people who are fans of independent cinema and want to make sure to be a part of the kind of continuing story of this film and your future films and everything, can you just kind of tell us a little bit about how we can help kind of get the word out if the film resonated and stuff? How can people find out more?
Oh, I think the question, like, for other people to promote their films, or
I'm
for
sorry, how can people help spread the word about this film?
well, reviews, letterbox,
Yeah.
and yeah, I think that all marketing helps in a way. I think the word of mouth is really important, especially for indie filmmaking, and that's how we, how we got this out there, by promoting it constantly, and like making the most out of the marketing resources that we have, and that's a great way to to make people talk about it, because the more that
Instagram
people
and
hear about the film, yeah,
Instagram.
more that the more that people hear about the film, the more curious they will get. And if you get reviews and festivals and press, all that helps in order to to achieve a successful run for the film.
Yeah. And I think it's inspiring too that we can kind of get um convinced that there just is no way anymore to make super independent films, and that this is just something that is just kind of, that's a bygone era, that independent, but there are still people who are able to figure it out, marshal the resources, pull it together, and do it. So really appreciate both of you for being a part of that, and for sharing the film with our festival over here. I hope you're able to
Yeah, I'm very happy
enjoy
to.
enjoy the rest of the run of this film.
I appreciate it, man.
Thank you
Thank
very
you so
much.
much.
Okay, thank you very much.